Assalamu alaikum. Did you know that eating more protein will actually help you to lose fat? If you're here right now, you're probably looking to learn how to eat more protein, how it's going to help you to lose fat, build muscle, develop a toned body, transform your body, get the body you want, have the energy levels you want, have everything else that you want, what protein sources to eat, how much you need, etc., etc. Well, in this protein guide, this comprehensive protein guide, I'm going to show you everything you need to know about protein, the science, the sources, the systems, everything to systematically achieve a weight loss, fat loss transformation, a muscle growth transformation, anything you need to succeed when it comes to protein. And as usual, I've got a very in-depth slideshow for you because I don't want to leave any stone unturned. So as usual, we're going to go very thorough, inshallah. The M3 Protein Guide, 5+ reasons why protein is extremely important, critically important for fat loss and muscle building, how much protein to eat per day, and which protein sources to eat. So bismillah, let's dive in. First off, let's dive into why is protein important for fat loss? Because maybe you think protein is just for people who want to build muscle. Well, here's the thing. So the first thing you need to understand is how fat loss works, right? As well as how weight gain works, right? And I've talked about this in other videos. See my other videos for a more in-depth breakdown on, exactly what a calorie deficit is. But in order for you to lose weight, you need to be burning more calories than you consume. So usually that means we're going to eat a little bit less calories, not too low, as I've talked about in other videos, because if you go too low, it has other effects where your energy levels drop and then you end up burning less calories and feeling miserable and not being able to stick to it and not being able to fit in the foods you want. But we do want to make sure the amount of calories we're burning is greater than the amount of calories that we're consuming. And protein actually helps a lot with that, and I'll explain why in a second. And then, of course, if we want to gain muscle, we do need to consume more calories than we burn. And so that's where, for somebody who wants to gain weight, obviously you need to eat more. And we'll talk about that as well, right? So now, how many calories do you burn per day? What accounts for this calories out equation? Well, it's very important that you understand a couple different things that protein actually affects all of them, okay? One of them is thermic effect of food. So the food that you eat, there are calories that are expended in the processing of that food that you eat. And protein actually has the highest thermic effect of any other macronutrient, so more than carbs and fats do. Exercise activated thermogenesis, so how many calories you burn when we work out. If we eat more protein, we're going to perform better in the gym, so we're going to burn more calories while we work out. But then also non-exercise activated thermogenesis, so calories that we burn through our activity levels outside of the gym. Protein is actually going to help us to do more of that because we're going to have more energy, better recovery, better muscle strength. Just again, the energy is probably the biggest thing, and everything just improves when you eat more protein when combined with the right other dietary aspects I've talked about in other videos, like fiber, the right calories, complex carbs, all that stuff. So see my other videos on that, and I'll have some links at the end to my other videos, but let's just focus on protein for now, and then we'll talk about the other ones in my other videos when you check those out after this, inshallah, if you haven't already. And the biggest thing that accounts for how many calories you burn per day is your basal metabolic rate, which protein affects as well through a variety of pathways. So let's talk about how protein affects each of those aspects of how many calories we burn so that we can burn more calories, so that even if we're not on a super low calorie diet, we can still actually lose body fat while actually not having to starve ourselves, which is part of the magic of protein when it fits in with the rest of the fat loss transformation equation. But also, obviously it's going to help you to gain muscle, and I'll talk about that as well in the next slide. So first thing, let's talk about thermic effective food. So the more thermic effective food that we have, the more calories we're burning through this, the more total daily calories we burn per day, the greater the deficit is, the more fat you lose, and the faster your fat loss and the longer term your fat loss will last. So every gram of protein that you eat burns 1 calorie. So every gram of protein is worth 4 calories, and 25% of that is burned through thermic effective food. So for instance, I usually eat about 250 grams of protein a day. You probably don't need that much, but 250 calories, it would take me about 30 minutes of cardio to burn that much, roughly, or the average person. So I'm saving myself from having to do 30 minutes of cardio just by eating enough protein. And the main reason I'm eating the protein is actually for the other benefits, but it has that other side benefit of helping you burn more calories and get into a bigger deficit. Now, the biggest way that protein helps you to, burn more body fat is that protein is going to help you build muscle, which I'm going to cover in depth on the next slide. And muscle increases your basal metabolic rate, which is 70% of the calories that you burn per day within this equation right here. So that's also going to help you to not only achieve a bigger deficit where you're going to lose more weight and lose it faster because the amount of calorie deficit you're in is bigger, which again, I explain how calorie deficit works in depth in another video. But also it's going to last longer because what happens is sometimes people, when they're in a deficit for a long time, their metabolism will adapt and slow down, or they'll lose muscle because they aren't eating enough protein, and then their metabolism slows down, their progress stops. So the good news is if you're eating enough protein, training to build muscle, keeping your muscle mass on point, and avoiding muscle loss while you're losing fat, your metabolism stays fast, which means that you're not going to hit a plateau after 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Instead, you could lose fat for more than 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months without ever hitting a plateau. And if you do hit a plateau, it's very easy to break through that plateau because you never lost muscle. So it's very easy to do what's called a reverse diet to speed up your metabolism, which again, I have another video that talks in depth about reverse diet, which you can check out after this as well. So Eating more protein is going to help you to build more muscle. It's going to burn the protein already just by eating it, increases your deficit through thermic effect of food, but it's also going to help you to build more muscle, which is going to increase your metabolic rate because, again, every pound of muscle burns calories even at rest. Like having muscle on your body is like having a rental property or a passive income stream that's paying you every month. All you got to do is just maintain it and it'll keep paying you every single month. So likewise, protein is going to keep burning calories every single day the more muscle you have on your body. Muscle, I said protein. Muscle is going to burn more calories every single day on your body, and part of how you maintain and build muscle is through eating enough protein, which we're going to talk about on the next slide, and on the next couple slides, and exactly how much you need. Now, the third reason why protein helps you to lose body fat is it's very satiating and it keeps you full. So it's going to help to prevent you from eating more calories from other foods. Because let's say that you're trying to eat in a calorie deficit. Let's say you're eating 1,600, 1,800 calories a day, which 1,600 is too low for many people, right? But let's say that you're somebody who 1,600 is a good amount for you, right? Maybe you're like a 150-pound woman and you don't have a huge appetite anyways, so 1,600 is good, or a 180-pound woman or whatever it is. But if you're a man and you're above 150, I mean, even at 150, most guys are going to need at least 1,800 calories. But again, I talk more about that in the other video. But the point is, if you're in a low-calorie deficit, but all you're eating is like sugar and fruits, you eat 1,600 calories of fruit, you're going to get hungry afterwards, even though fruits are healthy. If you eat 1,600 calories of nuts, I mean, you may or may not get hungry because fat is pretty satiating. But again, you're eating so many dietary fats and you're going to be losing quite a bit of muscle because protein helps prevent you from losing muscle, which is point number 5, which we're going to talk about when you're in a deficit. But let's say you eat like steak or chicken breast and you're eating like a pound and a half. Like a pound and a half of chicken breast is only like 750 calories. And I break that down in the next thing with the exact numbers later in this presentation, but that's going to prevent you from getting hungry, and it's going to help you to feel very full and not get hungry, versus if you eat chocolate and desserts, you get hungry shortly thereafter. Or even if you eat something healthy like sugar, or you just eat rice by itself, even the rice with meat can be good and very satiating, especially if you have fiber with it too. If you just have those carbs on their own, you're going to get hungry very quickly and easily. So protein helps prevent you from getting hungry, and it keeps you full. So then you eat less calories from other foods, which helps you get in a bigger deficit because you eat less calories total. So you can see 3 reasons already why it's going to help you get in a bigger deficit and lose more body fat. And we haven't even gotten to point number 5 as well, which is part of why protein is a requirement in the fat loss transformation equation, because you literally can't lose maximum amount of fat unless you're eating enough protein, because you're going to start losing muscle and your metabolism is going to slow down, as we've covered here already. Now, protein also benefits your muscular recovery, so it allows you to work out more and have more energy, and you're going to have a greater deficit due to larger energy expenditure, which I talked about before, both through exercise-activated thermogenesis and non-exercise-activated thermogenesis. You feel better, you feel stronger every single day, and you burn more calories, so that's going to help you burn more calories there. And then one of the biggest things, I mean, those are all big things. I can't really say which one is the biggest because they're all different, but they're all important. Eating enough protein helps you to prevent yourself from losing muscle when you're in a deficit, because if you're in a deficit, which I'm going to show you on the next slide, and you're not eating enough protein, you run a very high risk of losing muscle. So that way we can ensure that the weight you're losing is exclusively fat, which ensures that your metabolism doesn't slow down due to muscle loss, which means you can lose more fat over a longer period of time, and the weight you're losing is only fat, because the last thing you want to do is lose 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds and just look like a smaller version of the same out of shape that you were in before, which is what happens to a lot of people when they don't eat enough protein. You want to look good underneath the fat, so you got to make sure that what you're losing is fat, not muscle, right? And then the cool thing too is because your metabolism doesn't slow down, because you look good once you've lost the fat, you're less likely to rebound because you can easily transition off the diet once you're done losing the weight, and you can get yourself into a good maintenance mode without gaining any body fat because your metabolism is fast and healthy and responds well, and your muscles can actually store calories as well through carbohydrates, which we're going to talk about next. So I'm going to go into why protein is important for building muscle, but I'm also going to talk about what happens to food when you eat it and how this also pertains to fat loss. So when we eat carbs, our body breaks it down into sugars, aka glucose, and this is preferentially used for energy, or it can be stored as glycogen in the muscles and liver. And I think, yeah, there it is. Complex carbs stored in glycogen and liver as well as in skeletal muscle, and it's also leads to glucose, which leads to energy production, right? So it's very difficult for your body to store carbs as carbs, and I've talked about this in other videos. Carbs as fat. I've talked about this in other videos. So when you eat complex carbohydrates, there's a much higher chance you're just going to store it in the liver and in the muscles, so you're not going to have any issues. Now, when you eat protein, it breaks it down into amino acids, which leads to protein synthesis. And then also, there is an element of muscle tissue breakdown, especially if you're in a calorie deficit, but also when you train, when you work out, you break down muscle. So we need to make sure that we have enough amino acids to not only recover and replenish whatever muscle tissue breakdown and protein, breakdown has occurred, but also to not only recover it, but also to supercompensate and have even greater protein synthesis than how much protein breakdown we have. And that's why it's important that the rate of anabolism, which is how much muscle protein synthesis we have, all that stuff is greater again than the muscle protein breakdown. So again, when we have, when we're hungry, when we're stressed, when we have injury or illness, or when we exercise, we're breaking down muscle. So we're synthesizing muscle protein synthesis, when we're eating enough protein through having the right amino acids in our food and the insulin response, which is part of why carbs actually help to spare protein. This is part of why, this is all part of the muscle protein synthesis equation when it comes to the muscle growth transformation equation, but also in the fat loss transformation equation, because ideally you want to be gaining muscle while losing fat, or at least maintaining muscle and not seeing a greater rate of muscle protein breakdown than muscle protein synthesis. But it's important we eat enough protein to ensure that the rate of muscle protein breakdown does not exceed the rate of muscle protein synthesis, or we lose muscle and we don't gain muscle, versus when synthesis is higher than breakdown, we're gaining muscle, whether or not we're in a deficit. Of course, when we're in a surplus, we do have the insulin benefit of eating more carbohydrates, so we're going to be able to gain more muscle than if we're in a deficit. But I have many clients, especially a lot of beginners or people who have never trained consistently or properly or at a great intensity before, who gain muscle while losing fat at the same time, which is amazing, right? Now, when we eat fats are a lot more easily stored as fat inside of the body, especially when we're in a surplus, which is why when you're bulking, it's important to keep the fats low. When you're cutting, you could go a little bit higher in fats, but I tend to like to keep the fats lower while you're cutting, while you're in a deficit, because then you can eat more carbs, which is going to give you more energy and help you perform better in the gym, perform better at work, and feel better overall. So I'm explaining it briefly because I want to keep this video short, because my videos do tend to be a little bit overly long-winded, so I'm going to just leave it at that. But if you have questions on this, drop a comment and let me know in the comments below, and feel free to pause this and look through these graphs. And if you have some specific questions on these graphs, then just let me know as well, because these are important to understand as well. You don't have to understand this stuff like at a deep scientific level in order to lose fat. All you got to understand is eat enough protein, eat in a calorie deficit, and you'll lose fat. Eat enough protein, eat enough of a calorie surplus, train properly, and you'll gain muscle. And training properly is also important for losing fat and preventing muscle loss as well, which we talk about in other videos, including my strength training for fat loss video. So that leads to the question, how much protein you need per day? So some studies would say you need as little as 0.7 grams per pound in lean body mass, but that's just way too low. 1 gram per pound in lean body mass seems to be more optimal. And there are also studies that show there's no benefit in going above 1.5 grams per pound in lean body mass, but there's some benefit in going above 1 gram per pound in lean body mass. So this is empirical data based on studies. You also have to remember that empirical data is great, but you also got to just get the data on your own body. You got to test stuff on your own body, because everybody's different. And what I've seen in my experience is I actually need more protein than the average person, versus there are people who are at my same level in fitness, body composition, everything else, who need a little bit less protein. So everybody's a little different, and I'll tell you how to establish that for yourself. I've also spoken to professional bodybuilders who have been doing this for 30 plus years. And back in the day, before they had all these empirical studies and research, all the bodybuilders at the end of the competition would come to each other and they'd say, okay, you gained 8 pounds of lean mass, you look leaner this year, yet you're 8 pounds heavier. What did you do differently? Oh, you had protein post-workout. Okay, protein post-workout is probably a good thing then, even if empirical studies have indicated that getting protein directly post-workout is not important. And that is something I didn't include in this guide, is when to time your protein. So it is best to spread out your protein intake throughout the day. That's important. So, and I've talked about it in other videos, but if you have more questions on that, let me know. But right now I just want to talk about the total and how to kind of structure it and all that stuff. So I usually recommend 1 gram per pound in body weight, okay? Body weight is different from lean body mass, by the way. So for instance, let's say you have somebody who's 250 pounds and 30 or 40% body fat. Because their body fat percentage is very high, their lean body mass is actually a lot less than that. If they're 30% body fat and they weigh 250 pounds, that means they have 75 pounds of fat on their body, which means if you were to subtract the fat from their body, they would only weigh 175 pounds. So their lean mass is actually only 175 pounds, which is why somebody who weighs 250 pounds at 30% body fat can easily get away with eating only 200 grams of protein a day, maybe as low as 170 grams of protein a day, and still be eating enough protein, because that's 1 gram per pound in lean body mass. And somebody who's at that level where they're 30% body fat is probably not super advanced when it comes to their training, to where even increasing their protein a little bit will make a big difference. And they're not going to be able to train super hard to where they're breaking down muscle at the level that a professional athlete would, where a professional athlete would probably need closer to that 1.5 gram per pound in lean body mass. For me, My lean body, so my body weight's about 207 and I'm about 12% body fat. So my lean body mass is about 180, and I tend to need at least 250 grams of protein a day. And 1.5 times 180 is let's see, that's 90 plus, so that's 270. So again, 1.5 grams per pound in lean body mass for me would be 270 grams of protein a day, and I definitely need at least 250. Sometimes I go as high as 350. I notice no benefit if I do more than 350, and there's definitely diminishing returns when I go above like 270 or 250. But if I go below 250, I start to notice a difference. And if I eat below like 220 to 230, my results start to really suffer. So even though a lot of people would say, oh, you don't need that much protein, you only need 0.7, oh, Munir, you only need 120 grams of protein. Those people are wrong, because I've tested this stuff extensively on myself, and they're definitely wrong. So, however, there are some guys around my level who can get away with like 180 grams of protein, but I've never seen anybody who weighs 200, 205, 210 pounds. No matter how great their genetics are, no matter if they were born with muscles, they still need 180 grams at least to get the best results possible. And I have a friend who falls in that category, incredible genetics, and he still needs at least 180 grams, and he's 205 and he's like 5'6", 5'7", right? But most guys around my size are gonna need at least 220, 250, or more. And there's a lot of bodybuilders who would swear that you need like 350 plus, who have been doing this professionally for many years. So again, that's bodybuilding. Now, if your goal is just weight loss, again, if you're like over 200 pounds as a man, you probably only need 200, unless you're like 6'6". If you're 6'6", then you probably do have, at least 200 pounds of lean body mass to where you may need a little bit more protein. Like I would say if you're 6'6", let's probably go for 250 if you weigh 250 plus, right? And same thing with women. If you're under 6 foot, even if you're like 260 pounds, you probably only need 150 grams of protein. Maybe go as high as 200 just for the satiation effects. But again, you're not going to need as much as what, directly with the equation of per body weight. You want to maybe go with the lean body mass equation. You don't have to know your lean body mass or your body fat percentage per se. You could start with the body weight equation, but here's where I would cap it for men versus women. And again, that's how it relates with body weight versus lean body mass. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions on that in the comments, and inshallah, we'll go from there. And then again, what I've noticed is a lot of people do need to err on the side of higher. Their results are going to suffer. So how do you test on yourself so you know whether you need more or whether you can get by on less? Start with 1 gram per pound in body weight, unless you're, again, over 200 pounds as a man or over 150 pounds as a woman, right? And then just account for the fact that if you're 6'6", I'd probably up it to 250, right? And if you're over 6 foot as a woman, I'd probably up it to 200. But if you're shorter than that, then 200 should be sufficient for a man, even if you're 300 pounds, right? And same thing with women. Now, for guys who are like 300 pounds, they often have a lot of like appetite issues, to where I will probably have them do 220, maybe even as high as 250, just so that we get the satiation effects that we talked about right here, right? Because protein is satiating and keeps you full, so it's going to help an overeater who's 300 pounds to not overeat, while giving them a lot of good thermic effect, while helping them build muscle. But let's say that they have a day where they only get 200, it's not going to kill their recovery like it would for like an athlete like myself, where I have a day of 200, my recovery is going to be less than it would be if I got my usual 250 plus, right? So start there, test it out on yourself. Make sure all your other variables are dialed in with like sleep, the rest of your nutrition, the rest of your calorie deficit or surplus, depending on your goal, the rest of your training, the rest of your cardio, especially if you're trying to be in a deficit, because cardio helps you increase the deficit, or at least getting enough steps per day, even if you're not doing formal cardio. And then if your results are good, then keep it. If your results are good, but you struggle to eat that much protein, it's difficult for you, then try going a little bit less, like 10, 20% less, see if your results are still good. And if they are, you can get by with 10, 20% less. If they're not, then you got to up it and build the habits around eating enough protein, which we're going to talk about here. And then, obviously, when it comes to let's say that you eat enough protein, you have all your other variables dialed in, but you still don't get ideal results and you're still not recovering well from your workouts, there could be other factors like low testosterone or high cortisol. I mean, there's or poor mobility and blood flow, to where you might need deep tissue massage. You might need to supplement some things to bring your natural testosterone levels up. And in some rare cases, people need to get on hormone replacement therapy. But I've had people in their 60s and 70s who recovered just fine, as long as they're getting enough protein. So again, and you might need some stuff to help you absorb more protein if you're having like a lot of diarrhea and you're not absorbing the protein properly, or if you're getting a lot of motility issues and your stomach is not producing enough stomach acid to process protein. But again, these are very minority cases. Like less than 1% of cases have this issue. So 99% of the time, you should be good to go. But yeah, I mean, if your results are not good, you could always up it a little bit and you may find that your results are a little better. But again, if you're getting digestion issues, then we might need to look at what protein sources you're eating, or potentially look into solving some more severe digestion or hormonal issues. But again, I don't want to go too complex with this guide. I want to keep it short. So hopefully that makes sense. I'll probably do a part 2 on this where I talk a little bit more about timing and I answer some of the questions in the comments below. But this guide should apply to like 95% of people, and more complexity than this should not be needed, except for in like maybe 5% of cases max. Okay, so what protein sources should you eat? I'm sorry if anybody's a vegan watching this. I don't think I have a lot of vegans in my audience, but there may be some. at least half your daily intake, in my opinion, should come from lean animal protein sources. And if you're a vegan, I would recommend that you follow, a vegan coach because they specialize in this, because I do not specialize in vegan. I always refer vegans to a vegan specialist, which I know a couple of them that are decent, right? Or that are good. Sorry, I don't want to say decent as if they're not amazing. I mean, they're good, right? I'm just still not a fan of veganism. I'm very much about the meat, right? I even have an uncle who would say it's haram to be vegan because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about eating meat in the Quran. But anyway, so 1 pound of lean raw meat, which you don't have to eat it raw. People ask me this all the time. No, I'm just telling you the measurement raw, but you should cook your meat, okay? I'm not Liver King. I'm not gonna tell you to eat raw meat. You should cook your meat, in my opinion, because it's safer, because you could get foodborne illness if you don't cook the meat. And when you cook it, it usually loses about 25% of its weight, depending on the method used for cooking. But 1 pound of lean raw meat is roughly 100 grams of protein. So you don't have to be like perfect, like where it's like, oh, turkey's only like 48, beef's only like 48, oh, chicken's like, 53. Just per 8 ounces, right? Which is half a pound. Just cap it at 100, because if you drive yourself insane where it's like, oh well, chicken breast is 106, turkey's only 96 per pound, beef's only like 96 per pound as well. No, just don't overwhelm yourself with that complexity. Just 100, whether it's chicken, whether it's beef, as long as it's lean though. Okay, if it's a fatty meat, then it could be less. Like lamb has more fat than protein, so that's why I specify lean meat. Okay. But yeah, so like let's say that you buy 7 pounds of chicken breast or 7 pounds of 93% lean ground turkey or cod or shrimp. These are all lean protein sources, which I'm going to cover in the next one. That's going to get you 100 grams of protein per day for 7 days, 1 week, because each pound is 100 grams and you're spreading 7 pounds over 7 days. So it's 1 pound a day, which is 100 grams of protein per day. So that covers half your intake if your target's 200. And you could up that to 1.5 pounds per day. So that's 10.5 pounds of meat per week, and you'll hit 150 grams of protein per day. Now the vegans are probably rolling over, in their seat like, oh, 1.5 pounds per day of meat, that's so much. But don't worry, it's really not that big of a deal. Like there's bodybuilders who eat like 6 pounds of meat a day, which again, that's excessive. That's 600 grams of protein, but there's people who have done it and they survived and they're alive and they lived into their 70s and beyond. So again, in fact, I know people in their 60s and 70s who still eat 200, 300 grams protein plus per day who are bodybuilders and they're in perfect health, right? So again, if you eat 1.5 pounds of meat, lean meat per day, it's about 150 grams of protein a day, and then you just have to get another 50 grams from other sources, again, if your target's 200. Like, if you do 2 scoops of whey protein, boom, there's your 50 grams right there, so now you're at 200. Or let's say that if you get digestive issues from whey, which some people do, you could do Garden of Life plant-based protein instead, right? So there's a lot of options that you have, okay? Now, next up, let's talk about my favorite lean protein sources. Boneless, skinless chicken breast, amazing. 93% lean ground turkey, 95% lean ground beef. Weirdly enough, the 93% lean has a little more fat than the turkey, so that's why I like to go with 95% lean ground beef if you can find it, or you could just get 90% and you could drain out all the fat with the turkey baster with an ice cube, or just by draining out the side of the thing if you can't afford or you can't find 95%. Cod is great. It's a type of fish. It's very good. Shrimp is good. Scallops are good. 0% Greek yogurt is good, and high-end, high-quality, low-fat or fat-free dairy like cheese is also good, as long as you don't get digestive issues from it. High-end, high-quality eggs and egg whites. Now, eggs are not a lean protein source. They have just as much fat as protein, but egg whites are lean. However, eggs do have some good micronutrients in them, so I'll still have, some of my clients do 1 to 2 eggs a day. That way they're not going too high in fats, but they're still getting some of the vitamin and mineral benefits of, the egg yolks while still getting enough protein. Then we might do the rest with whites, or we might do the rest with protein shake, and we'll definitely do most of the protein from, real food, meat. Sorry, I almost said wheat. Meat. High-end, high-quality whey protein is good. Garden of Life plant protein is good. Now, why am I plugging their brand? I don't have an affiliate code, and I don't make any money by telling you to buy their protein if you want to do plant protein. It's just I've tried a couple different brands of plant protein. This is the only one that doesn't taste like crap and doesn't make me bloated. In fact, even some of the other ones that taste good make me bloated, but this one is the only plant protein that doesn't make me bloated, and alhamdulillah, it also happens to taste good. But that's why I vouch for it. Maybe I should get an affiliate code, but I don't have one, so you can trust that I'm not just telling you this for the money. I truly believe in the product. It's a great product. I mean, I believe in everything I vouch, whether I get paid for it or not, including my own product. But again, Garden of Life plant protein, I'm not tied to them in any way, but it is a very good plant protein. Now, as I mentioned before, you could do fatty meats, and there are some fatty meats, like semi-fatty meats, like wild-caught salmon doesn't have that much fat, but it has more fat than these ones, and it has omega-3s, which is a very important essential fatty acid that you do need in your diet. Grass-fed red meat has a lot of good, it has omega-3, but it also has a lot of good vitamins and minerals, very important. It has iron, which is important for, premenopausal women or just women of any age under the age of 50 who are, losing a lot of iron whenever they have their period. So very important that you're getting in red meat as a woman. Just try to keep it lean though, like, flank steak, sirloin steak has a little bit of fat, but it's leaner. But if you're doing ribeyes and like stew beef and brisket and all these other really fatty cuts of beef, you're gonna be eating too much fat, and generally we wanna limit calories from fat in most cases, whether bulking or cutting, except for in some specific cases, which I've covered in some other videos, but we won't go into today because I wanna keep this simple and short. Now, some other sources of protein, you could try to do lentils and beans, but the problem with lentils and beans is, as we talked about amino acids before, you need a complete amino acid profile. And all the animal sources have a complete amino acid profile, but lentils and beans, unfortunately, do not. So you would have to pair it with brown rice to get a complete protein. That's another thing I like about the Garden of Life protein blend, is it combines these complementary protein sources. That's part of why it's so expensive, is that they have to take so many beans and so many of all these things to get enough protein in it, but it does have a good protein to calorie ratio, which is another benefit of that protein, as opposed to most vegan proteins have a very bad protein to calorie ratio. But the problem is, if you're eating real, plant-based foods, you're going to end up having a lot of carbs and a lot of calories with it to get the same amount of protein as a lean protein source. So to give you an example, 12 ounces of cooked boneless skinless chicken breast, which is the equivalent of 1 pound raw boneless skinless chicken breast, is 104 grams of protein, or 106 depending on where you look. 5.6 grams of fat, 0 grams of carbs, and only 497 calories. So like I told you guys before, 1.5 pounds of raw chicken breast, boneless, skinless, is only 750 calories, right? Which is amazing, considering that it also has 150 grams of protein. If we or 156 technically, or 158, whatever, right? 150. Let's just round it, make it easier for ourselves. Now, in contrast, 13 ounces of lentils, which is 5.5 cups cooked, or 2 cups of uncooked dry, is 99 grams of protein. So it is, pound for pound, almost as good as chicken breast as far as protein content, but it's not a complete protein source. And it also has 4 grams of fat, 220 grams of carbs, and 1,265 calories. It has more than double as many calories, right? Lentils are healthy, but I wouldn't consider them a protein source. I'd consider them a carb source, because they have more than twice as many carbs as protein, okay? And again, as I said here, I consider lentils a carb, not a protein source. And they're a great carb source. They have a low glycemic index. So, as I've mentioned in other videos, they hit your bloodstream slow. They're good for diabetics. They give you good energy levels. They keep you full. They have high fiber, which is good for motility, energy levels, being regular, digestion, all that stuff. And they do have some protein benefits, but as a protein source exclusively, they're vastly inferior to animal protein from both a caloric perspective and from a complete amino acid perspective. So that's why I prefer animal protein, and why I would recommend that you do that you do animal protein instead of lentils, and why it's a lot harder to get this in as a vegan, which is why I don't specialize in vegans, because I'd rather just refer them to coaches who specialize in that, right? And just focus on what I get people good results for. Hundreds of clients, over 1,000 clients who've gotten great results eating meat, getting great results in their health, their fitness, their fat loss, their muscle growth, everything. Now, to give you another example, 40 ounces, which is 7 cups cooked of chickpeas, which is about 2.3 cups uncooked dry, is 105 grams of protein, so about the same as the chicken, but almost 30 grams of fat, which is a lot more, and 315 grams of carbs, which is 1,883 calories. So you can see, to get the same amount of protein, you have to get so much of the other stuff where it's not really worth it, and it's very difficult. So unfortunately for vegans, it's hard to get protein without getting a lot of carbs, fats, and therefore calories with it. Oops. It's still possible to be a vegan in deficit, but I always refer vegan clients to a vegan trainer. But I first try to convince them to stop being a vegan. Like, for instance, there's a movie called The Game Changers that tries to manipulate a bunch of studies as propaganda against meat eating, but there's a really great breakdown of it from Lane Norton, where he breaks down the entire movie and why all the studies are miscited, and why the entire movie is basically BS, the Game Changers movie. So don't buy into the vegan propaganda. Allah created meat for us to eat. He talks about it in the Quran, and obviously, the Prophet ﷺ used to eat meat. Now, he wouldn't eat a whole lot of meat, like he wasn't eating like excessively, especially the fatty meats. But again, the Prophet ﷺ was eating his protein intake, and as well as a number of other things. And some of the things he ate back then are now mostly genetically modified, like for instance barley, and I've talked about in another video. But again, I don't want to go off topic here. The point is, Allah created meat. There's verses in the Quran about it, and obviously bodybuilders have validated again and again that you generally need meat to be healthy. A lot of vegans come off veganism because their health consequences are pretty bad. And there's a handful of people who get good results being a vegan, but again, I'm very anti-vegan. I'm very pro-protein and animal proteins. Just make sure you're doing high-quality halal meats, treating the animals ethically. That's the key. And then chickpeas, lentils, and beans still are healthy, and they still have your place in your diet, but as a complex carb source or as a fiber source, but not as a protein source. So again, I want to keep this video much shorter than the other ones because my other ones are a little too long. The conclusion is, eat more protein. It's going to help you stay fuller while trying to lose fat, while burning more calories. It's going to help you build more muscle, have more energy, which is going to help you whether your goal is to lose weight or gain weight. You want to choose high quality protein sources, as I've outlined before, that have minimal carbs and minimal fats and therefore minimal calories, so it's just pure protein. You want to also make sure that these foods are foods you digest well. So some types of meat, some people get digestive issues. So obviously if that's you and maybe you get digestive issues with chicken or beef or whatever it may be, then avoid that. Get high quality meat, so halal, organic if you can afford it, natural, not this genetically modified junk, which honestly I see a big difference. Like if I eat genetically modified chicken breast, I get digestive issues versus if I eat clean, natural chicken, no issues. And then you also want to make sure that the quality of the dairy and the eggs is also good. So pasture raised, eggs, high quality dairy, and then same thing, you don't want to get one of these cheap whey protein powders like Body Fortress or Muscle Milk that have a bunch of additives that make you bloated. You want to get something high quality like Levels grass-fed whey, Healthy Foods, Prime Tonics. Those are all good. Optimum Nutrition is decent, but I prefer Levels grass-fed whey if you're going the Amazon route. And I think you get Healthy Foods on Amazon too. And then Prime Tonics you'd have to order directly from their site, but that one is very good as well. So again, you want to use a high quality protein powder. Now, if you're watching this right now and you need help putting together a meal plan, and this sounds like a lot of info, plus all the info on like calories, carbs, fats, just a lot of stuff, and you're like, hey man, I don't know if I have time to put together my own meal plan. I work a lot of hours, I'm busy, I got kids, blah, blah, blah. But you'd rather just pay somebody to handle it for you, and again, you don't have the time to try to like trial and error and figure this out for yourself. Check out our program. I'll drop the details in the description, inshallah. But again, if you're in a position where money's tight, then don't worry. I have a bunch of free resources online. So take the time that you have and figure this stuff out for yourself, because I have all the information for free online. But it will take a lot of trial and error versus, again, if time is short but you have money, then obviously just hire us to do it for you. And then, of course, if you found this video helpful and insightful, please share with friends and family. And then I'm going to see if I can attach up here somewhere a link to my video where I talk about how to get in shape for a summer wedding, where I break down a couple sample meal plans. I talk a little bit about how a sustainable calorie deficit works, and I think I have another link to another video where I go even deeper into it. I also have another one, I'll try to attach it here, about like strength training and how to do strength training for fat loss and how it's helpful, so you can get better results both in fat loss, muscle growth, and a combination of both. And then, of course, if you want me to do a part 2 on this where I talk a little bit more about protein timing and I go into more of the intricacies, or you have some more specific questions, drop a comment, let me know, and inshallah, I'm excited to see you in the next video, so thank you so much. Check out those other videos I'm going to attach up there, inshallah, or I'm going to try to if I can figure out the tech on YouTube. And then stay tuned for the future videos. Subscribe if you haven't already. And inshallah, let me know in the comments if there's anything else that you need. All right, guys, assalamu alaikum.